So I'll get things started now. For anybody who's just literally joined the webinar now, if you don't mind muting your microphones and turning your video off for now, that would be great. Yeah, welcome everybody. This is my screen, sorry. Welcome to this webinar, which is being hosted by PEFC UK and International. The topic for today is certified paper packaging's role in the circular economy. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Tom Hallam, and I'm the founder at Brand Ethics Consulting, and I'll be moderating the discussion today as we go forward. Now, the things that we're going to cover off today, I'll give you a quick introduction on PEFC, what it's all about, and also a very macro level view of what the circular economy is. Our first speaker today will be Julia Cherundolo from Soil Association, who's going to give us some examples of ethical brands who have already incorporated certified paper-based packaging to great success. Following that, we'll have Christoph Jordan from RJ Wiggins, who will introduce a new product called Silvicta, which is a translucent paper grade. And then finally, we're going to have Roger Wright from Biffa, who's going to talk to us about closed loop systems. And the idea is with this lineup that we have people representing each level of the supply chain. Hopefully we'll have some time at the end for questions to the panel. If you do have a question during the webinar, please type that into the chat function and we will do our best to answer those at the end. Oh, sorry. Now quickly, brand ethics. What is brand ethics? Brand Ethics is a sustainability consulting specializing in paper and packaging in the forest products sector. The idea is to help brand owners and retailers reduce their environmental and social impacts. Now, I think we've gone slightly out of order there, sorry. Just a quick background from me. I used to work for, well, I've worked for many companies over the last 20 years. Started off at Reckitt, you'll see bottom right there in consumer products. I've also worked with UPM in Finland, Billerud-Korsnäs in Sweden, and DS Smith in the UK. So 15 years in forest products and then 5 years in consumer products. Some of the organizations that I'm working with now and over the last 12 months include Two Sides, Kingfisher, Amazon, H&M, Morrisons, and also I'm on the board of directors at PEFC representing the packaging industry. Now, forests are what I call precious resources. The main reason being that they are what we'd call carbon sinks. So along with the sea and the soil, forests are the most important carbon sink we have. They absorb 38% of all global CO2. But also they're crucial for biodiversity. Thousands of plant and animal species rely on the forest for their existence. Now, PEFC is a global forest certification body. It stands for the Programme for the Endorsement of Forest Certification. They manage 322 million hectares around the world. There are 1 million forest owners that fall within the certification scheme, and that includes 48 endorsed national forest certification schemes and also 20,000 companies who have chain of custody. And if we look at it on a global level, PEFC is the largest global forest certification body in terms of the volume of forestry that's actually covered. So one thing you will find that if you choose to specify PFC product, that you will generally have good availability due to the volumes of forest that are managed. Now, the benefits of certification, if you're a brand owner or a retailer, it's then evident to consumers that you are supporting sustainably managed forests. You're meeting legality requirements. So if you're looking at the EU timber regulation or the UK timber regulation, it classifies as low risk within those legislation policies. You're meeting customer expectations. There is a desire by many consumers to eliminate plastic and to increase the amount of paper packaging that's being used. It also ensures traceability for wood-based materials. So you have an audit trail of where your material is coming from, which is obviously crucial for external communication. As we've mentioned, it's the largest source of certified wood globally. And by using PFC material, you're supporting the UN Sustainability Development Goals. Now, as a brand owner, it's really important you communicate this onto your consumers to demonstrate that you're working in a responsible manner. And there's just a few examples up on the screen there of how you can communicate using the PFC logo. So the main topic of today will be about the circular economy. Some of you will be more familiar with this than others. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation is the most widely recognized body behind the circular economy, but this is something which runs across all industries. The circular economy as a model is designed to eliminate waste and pollution. The idea is really to tackle the problem of resource inefficiency which exists at the moment. Now, the waste hierarchy drives the circular economy, so the priorities are to, first of all, reduce. If you can reduce packaging, then do so. To encourage reuse, which is the second, and then wherever possible, when those two aren't possible, then recycling is the best option. The main objective is really to get away from what we call linear production models. So to get away from single-use packaging, that's the main intention. And in summary, really, that's saying we should all be looking to incorporate eco-design into a product. So when we're designing products, we should be looking at the whole, the 360-degree picture from sourcing through production to the end of life if we're going to make products and packaging which suit the circular economy model. And just as a wrap up here, I'm going to say that PFC certified paper is truly circular. If we look at the forest, sustainably managed forest at source, through the production process, then we have the use of paper-based products here, which then end up being recycled and then back into the chain. And in the UK and EU at the moment, 76% of paper and cardboard is actually being recycled. So that's just a whistle-stop tour at the beginning of PFC and the circular economy. So my first speaker today is Julia Chirundolo, and she will be looking at how brand owners and retailers can be part of the solution. Over to you, Julia.
Thanks, Tom. I just want to check that everyone can see my screen. Bear with me a second while I share. Can everyone see that and hear me okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Perfect. Yeah, so thanks, Tom, and hi, everyone. It's great to be here speaking with you today. So just to introduce who I am and why I'm talking to you about certified paper packaging today. So I'm Senior Trade Marketing Manager for Soil Association Certification, which is a certifier of organic and sustainable certification schemes. So we certify over 70% of UK organic food and drink products, as well as thousands of forest and forest product organisations around the world. So we're in a really unique position to understand the challenges and needs across the full value chain. And as a result, as an organisation, we're looking at packaging from lots of different angles. So firstly, as standard setters through the Soil Association charity for Organic and Cosmos, which is a beauty certification scheme. We're thinking about ways to ensure that the brands we work with minimize and improve their packaging. So we have the only organic standards in the UK that cover any aspect of packaging at all. And we encourage all organic companies that certify with us to use the least amount of packaging possible, and also to use recycled or recyclable materials. And we also ban the use of packaging that has harmful things in it, like PVC, GM materials, and phthalates. But packaging is actually a really complicated area for organic, due to the need to be able to really clearly differentiate and separate organic food from non-organic food. So reducing packaging isn't always as straightforward as we'd like. So we work with businesses, including all the retailers in the UK, to help them to understand their options. And we're really committed to supporting innovation and investment in truly sustainable, biodegradable and compostable packaging. And of course, while I'm here, we certified to PEFC and FSC standards across forest management and chain of custody. We certify almost 4,000 certificates worldwide, including many kind of packaging suppliers and manufacturers. And in our quest to support businesses on sustainable packaging options and the role of paper within this, last year we released a report to, I guess, just to shed a light on some of the really exciting innovations taking place within the paper packaging sector. And I'd really love to share a few of our case studies with you today. So firstly, what are consumers looking for when it comes to packaging? So last year, the Grocer surveyed 1,000 people in the kind of latter half of 2020 on their packaging preferences. And 77% of people said that sustainable packaging is really important to them. And actually over a third said that environmentally friendly packaging had become even more important to them during the pandemic. But really interestingly, in light of COVID, paper was also seen as the safest option from a food safety perspective. So while, pre-pandemic, bagless deliveries were favoured for kind of supermarket deliveries, post-pandemic, paper bag deliveries were favoured. So it's a really interesting shift to consider for brands thinking about how to make more sustainable packaging choices. And yeah, paper packaging can protect goods, it can provide product information, and it's both biodegradable and easily recyclable. And then forest source fibre can also be used to make kind of cellulose-based plastics and films too. So why choose paper packaging? So firstly, it's from a renewable source, trees. The majority of globally produced paper comes from production forests. So these are fast growing wood growing operations with harvesting cycles of as little as 5 to 10 years in the tropics, and then up to kind of 35 to 40 years in temperate climates. So they provide a really core material for a circular economy. Secondly, paper's recyclable. It's widely recycled globally and it's collected at household level, which really enables consumers to feel involved in tackling waste. The UK recycling rate for paper is 79%, which is the highest recycling rate of any material. Contrast that to plastic. So stats from 2018 showed plastic recycling in Europe is actually stuck at 40.9%. So it's quite a big difference. Thirdly, it doesn't pollute the environment. So if paper packaging does escape the waste recycling system, it won't persist in the environment because it's biodegradable. So the time it takes to biodegrade varies depending on a number of kind of environmental factors, but corrugated cardboard could decompose in as little as 3 months if it's broken down into little pieces and home composted. Whereas other common packaging materials such as aluminium, glass, plastic can take considerably longer to biodegrade and in the meantime can pose a threat to wildlife. And I just think it's crazy. Plastic's designed to last, yet about 50% of it is used as single use. I just don't see the logic in that. And then finally, innovation. There is just so much exciting innovation happening in this space at the moment, which provides so many more options for brand owners when they're looking for sustainable packaging options. We were really lucky to have Tom contribute to our paper packaging report with some of the developments happening in this space. I probably don't have time to go into any of these today, but you should definitely download the report and you can read his essay on it. So yeah, despite all of these benefits of paper packaging, there is a darker side, and renewable becomes completely irrelevant if the paper is coming from global deforestation, which is one of the major contributors to climate change and loss of wildlife habitat. So it's estimated that 15% of all greenhouse gas emissions actually are a result of deforestation. So choosing certified sources can really help to ensure that your packaging comes from trees that have been grown and harvested responsibly. So, for example, certified forests have to take into consideration high conservation values. They need to plan to ensure any activity in forests doesn't have any negative impact on biodiversity. And as well as acting as a carbon sink, forests provide a range of ecosystem services. So it's estimated that 1.6 billion people rely on the benefits that forests offer. And although forest plantations don't have necessarily the same qualities as natural forests, they can really ensure good working conditions for local people. They can encourage room for indigenous trees, wetlands, natural structures within the area. So this is much more likely to be the case in certified forests, which incentivizes the restoration and conservation of forest ecosystem services. And certification also helps to protect workers' rights, and it really ensures kind of inclusive consultations before any activities commence, as well as ongoing impact monitoring. So just to wrap up, that choosing certified materials really helps to ensure the positive externalities associated with paper packaging are actually realised, securing a long-term source of paper and card and demonstrating commitment to responsible forestry to your customers. So now what I would love to do is talk to you about 3 case studies from our own network of really great paper packaging initiatives. And the first is a really good example of how packaging can support the circular economy. So Selfridges are always looking at ways of making their operation more sustainable, and they've been using paper for their iconic yellow bags, which I'm sure you recognise from the start, but they really wanted to go further. So they also had a parallel problem, which was that the coffee cups being used by their staff, despite them encouraging kind of reusable containers, aren't often curbside recyclable due to the laminate lining inside. So in 2017, they worked with James Cropper to develop a process to upcycle the waste coffee cups collected from their employees into paper. And this now makes up 20% of each of their yellow shopping bags, which equates to about an 8-ounce coffee cup. So this reduces the amount of virgin material that actually goes into the bags, with the rest of the material coming from certified forestry sources. So having dedicated cup recycling bins in their sites increases the company's recycling rate, and also the whole bag is widely recycled at curbside too. So Selfridges really understand the importance of certification, and by 2025 they've committed to making sure that the most impactful materials used in every aspect of their business, from shop fit outs to packaging to branded products, all will come from certified sustainable sources. So this is a really great example of how collaboration between brands and manufacturers on packaging can actually create solutions to lots of different challenges simultaneously, which I think is brilliant. So the next case study comes from global beauty brand Garnier, who recently launched the first generation of cosmetic tubes that integrate certified cardboard in their packaging within their organic skincare line. So Garnier co-developed this tube with their packaging manufacturer Albéa Group, which basically replaces part of the plastic with paper-based certified material. And while creating this alternative, the brand also took the opportunity to reduce the cap size, removing plastic usage further. So they were able to reduce the plastic per tube by 49% compared to their previous packaging, and also make it 29% lighter, which has resulted in reductions of impact, including CO2 from transported products. However, given the plastic cap isn't currently recyclable, Garnier's innovation teams are currently working on increasing the amount of cardboard to make the packaging recyclable, as well as integrating post-consumer recycled plastic into the tube, as it's their ambition to transition all of their plastic packaging to be reusable, recyclable, or compostable by 2025. And what I found really interesting about this example is that Albéa Group told us that the demand for responsible packaging has increased exponentially over the past 3 years, and the market success of this Garnier tube solution has generated a lot of interest from other brands, both within and outside the beauty industry. So it really highlights the importance of brands sharing their innovations and successes with the wider industry to encourage and inspire change across the board, I suppose. And then finally, I'd like to talk to you about another one of our organic licensees, Abel & Cole. So they made the decision to use cardboard as their packaging material way back 33 years ago when the business started. And as a nationwide produce delivery company, they wanted a material for their boxes that could be recycled by any facility nationwide in case they couldn't collect them for any reason. But also cardboard is a light but sturdy material that can be reused, which is really important because on the whole, their boxes are collected with the customer's next delivery, and they've recorded up to 8 reuses for each box. But they actually only recently pursued chain of custody certification for their packaging because despite buying certified materials since their inception way back in 1994, they really wanted a way to kind of guarantee the integrity of their packaging and reassure themselves and their customers that their packaging isn't further contributing to the effects of deforestation. So getting chain of custody certification was possible in large part due to the good relationship they have with their existing manufacturer, GWP, which is a design and manufacturing group that focuses on corrugated cardboard. And all of the material used by Cordboard, which is a division owned by GWP, comes from certified forestry sources. So when a growing number of GWP's customers, including Abel & Cole, kind of showed interest in having their packaging certified across the full chain of custody, it really made sense for the business to also undertake certification. So my point here is for any brands listening that are looking for certified packaging solutions, but perhaps you're already working with a manufacturer that doesn't have chain of custody certification, it's really worth noting that manufacturers are driven by their clients' needs, including when it comes to
the presentation
their business.
waste management report.
So don't be afraid to ask your current manufacturer to get certified or else shop around. And then finally, I just also wanted to mention a fantastic new initiative from Abel & Cole, which might not use paper, but it really takes the principles of reduce, reuse and recycle in packaging even further. So this is their Club Zero initiative, which allows their customers to order pantry items which get delivered to their door in pots that are then collected, washed, refilled and then reused again and again and again. And this really keeps the zero single-use packaging loop going. So a really inspiring business and a great way to round off my packaging case studies. So that's me done. Just to say that there's lots more case studies in the report, as well as Tom's kind of list of really interesting innovations. So please do download it to discover them all at the URL at the top of the page. And we also have lots of other support for brands exploring sustainable packaging solutions on our website. So have a look around. And if you're actually a packaging manufacturer, supplier, converter, and would like to speak to us about getting chain of custody certification, then we'd love to hear from you too. So that's me done. I think I'm handing back to Tom. Thank you so much.
Hi, yeah, thank you, Julia. Some really great case studies, I think, there, and particularly one point that I picked up on there was about the sharing of ideas between brand owners. I think is a great point to make. You know, if we're going to scale up innovation, I think the only way to do it is to be open about new areas of activity and not see them as a competitive advantage, see them as a necessity. So thanks so much for that, Julia. Next up, we have Christoph Jordan, who is going to speak about Sylvicta, which is Arjo Wiggins' latest translucent paper. So over to you, Christoph.
Tom, and very good morning to all of you, and maybe for some of you, good afternoon as well. So it's my pleasure to take you through an innovation in food contact packaging that is the translucent and high barrier paper that we've named Sylvicta. So just a slide on R.J. as an intro. So R.J. we are a historic paper maker on high-end segments like creative papers, translucent papers, packaging, and some technical papers as well. We're a group composed of 4 production sites, 2 in the UK, as you can see, 1 in Spain, 1 in China, and we've got also dedicated R&D lab in France, hence my accent. We're a group of about 800 plus employees around the world with more than 300 years of savoir-faire. So quite it's fair to say we're a historic paper maker. All of our sites are ISO 14001, and the Chartham mill there in the UK is PEFC certified. So on my side, I'm running the translucent papers division in R.J. so comprising 2 mills, the one in Chartham, where we are manufacturing Sylvicta, and the one in Chuzhou in China. And I'm part of the shareholders as well of R.J. So that's it really for the company. I mean, if we are all around the phone today, it's for a good reason that we realize how much the climate change and replacing plastic is overwhelming and is really dominating the market and business trend currently. So we are starting from this public concern. I'm not going to come back on that. I think we are all very much aware of it. Just wants to highlight here 3 international initiatives that has seen life since the last couple of years to try to answer this public concern. And so we've got the WWF calling really for a UN treaty on plastic pollution. That was in 2020, so relatively recent. Much older, in fact, quite surprisingly, I didn't realize that it was backdated in 2015. It's the UN Development Goals, so that's 17 goals. And then finally, and Tom alluded to that a bit earlier, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, whereby more than 20 governments, 250 of the largest companies in the world have signed this global commitment for a circular economy for plastic. So how can we address this plastic challenge? Well, clearly I think it's fair to say there is not one single solution. And this illustration, I quite like this chart. It's issued from extracted from the report Breaking the Plastic Wave from 2020. On the left-hand side, you've got a business as usual scenario, so a do-nothing scenario, basically, in which you can see that we're currently generating about 250 million tons of plastic a year, and this will grow up to 430 million tons if we do nothing by 2040. A bit scary, and the scariest part is that, okay, we have got a certain proportion that is recycled, quite a large proportion that is being disposed. So disposed is typically in landfill or incineration, okay? And then the biggest part, so 56% of it, is what is called mismanaged in this report. It means that it is open burning or plastic or terrestrial pollution. They are, however, drawing a system change scenario. And what I like in this system change scenario is not everything is not based on trying to replace plastic, but quite a big part is based on reducing, in fact, the plastic production. And that comes from 2 things mainly. One is about the reuse. So we can reduce it. It's really reusing, being able to reuse, so the refill. Yeah, sorry, the refill that we can see more and more in our shops. And the second part is really about eco-design. So how can I design my product in a different way so that I don't use plastic at all, not packaging at all. Then we've got a proportion where paper has got a role to play in the substitution. But you can see it is a proportion, but it's not necessarily the highest one. So paper and bioplastic have got a role to play in the substitution part. And then recycling needs to be reworked as well and reinforced typically in the developing countries mostly. So disposal remains almost flat, as you can see. And then the whole objective is really to reduce the mismanaged part from 56% to only 10%. There will always be this part. So what I want to show here is that, yeah, paper has got a role to play in the equation of reduce, recycle, substitute with the substitution part, but it's much wider than that. So at RJ Wiggins, we have tried to play our part in this substitution by developing Silvicta. Okay, so we've developed Silvicta at the end of last year. Basically, what is it? What we're trying to do when we develop a barrier paper for food packaging, mostly food packaging, but it can be also, and it is also cosmetics or pharmaceutical or electronics. So anytime you try to replace plastic, you try to replace plastic because it is transparent and because it is protective. So that's what we have developed with our product, to really start from what are the needs of the consumers and of the brand owners. So our paper is basically a food contact paper engineered to achieve very high barrier properties in a clean and natural translucent way, and of course sustainable and certified material, which is of the utmost. So keeping oxygen, odors, mineral oils, and moisture on the outside, and inside to keep the aroma, freshness, flavor, and grease. That's really to try to mimic as much as possible plastic, because plastic is quite a great material actually. This slide is quite important. It's really showing the characteristics, and you will see that a lot of functionality comes back to what plastic is doing, and then we are adding all the environment aspects as well. So on the environment aspects, Silvicta is fully biodegradable both in soil and also marine degradability. So typically in the ocean. Okay, this has all been tested and certified by certified bodies. It's fully compostable, not only industrial compostability, which is not so much widely spread typically in Europe, but also home compostable, which was a must for us. It's quite obvious, but it's a fully recyclable material. Okay, it's a non-coated material. We don't add any coating to that initially, intentionally. So it's fully recyclable in the current paper stream. Again, certified in Germany, in France, in Italy, where it's the most difficult one, I would say, to get the certification. And finally, it is carbon neutral. So we offset all of the carbon emissions that we have through the World Land Trust. In terms of food safety, which is very important as well to us, it's FDA and also BfR 36 approved. We also have a grade which is 36.1 and 36.2 for those of you who are familiar with that. Importantly, it contains absolutely zero plastics. Okay, not only zero plastics, by the way, but it's also PFAS free. Okay, big actual topic, as you're sure you're aware. No fluorocarbons at all, no fluorochemicals at all. Okay, so it's pure cellulosic fibers. It cannot be purer than that, and all certified as well, both FSC and PEFC pulp. It provides a very high mineral oil barrier, which is important for food safety in terms of migration. So you don't want to have the MOSH or MOAH contained in the inks, typically migrating into the food. So it is a perfect barrier to mineral oil. And naturally translucent. What I mean here, it's not chemically transparentized, as you can find sometimes on the market. It's fully naturally, I would say, or mechanically transparentized. And then finally, in terms of functional properties, where it's really striking that in terms of oxygen barrier, it's got a super high oxygen barrier. So it means that it is 50 times better oxygen barrier to a PET, for example. So it's hard to believe for a pure paper, but it is a higher barrier to oxygen than any plastic you can find on the market, any of them. It's got also, when it goes along, of course, a very high aroma barrier for things like pet food, for perfumes, or for teas, coffees. Very high grease barrier. So for those of you familiar, kit test of 12, when we do comparison tests, it's even a higher grease-resistant barrier paper than any other grease-resistant paper you can find on the market. So very superior grease barrier. And finally, versatile. What I mean here that it's a paper, so it can be very well printed. It prints extremely well. It can be folded. It can be formed into pouches or whatever. So quite a full scope of characteristics to try to mimic plastic or even go a step further, and of course bring all of the all credentials that you can think of. Now I try to illustrate here, to go really in very much detail of what it can do actually for you if you're a brand owner and looking for a replacement solution there to play a role in the circular economy. So segmenting by food and packaging type application. Very simple application would be overlays. So overlays, but also leading films. And leading films, that's a picture of a food tray made of carton board. Currently, the leading film is made of plastic. This can be really easily replaced by our paper. The paper is not as transparent as plastic, very clearly. It's transparent like a tracing paper would be for those of you who remember using it from school, or let's say semi-transparent, which actually it is a trade-off for the brand owners, but we find out that the trade-off is more than acceptable and sometimes required by the brand owners because they don't want it to look like plastic. It does look like paper, actually, like a tracing paper. Or leading film as well for coffee pods. Windows application, sandwich wedges, it's been a hot topic in the UK, I know. So we are providing solutions to have a fully recyclable window patching. So which means that your whole sandwich wedge is recyclable. Or just all the food to go trays that you have if you're a sushi eater, for example, it always comes with a window patch made of plastic. This can really easily be replaced by a translucent paper. Wraps, this is an actual product that you can find in Aldi in the UK of a fresh sandwich wrap. And also this is a very different application that I wanted to illustrate. We've got the capabilities, converters have found ways of metallizing Sylvicta, which means that you bring a super high moisture barrier, very similar to an aluminum foil, for example, and still make it fully recyclable. Okay, so because the deposition of aluminum is just a couple of microns, it's less than 0.02 gram per square meter equivalent, extremely small and enhancing quite a lot barrier properties, typically for butter or margarine. Flow packs, dye packs, bags, standard pouches, SOS bags, block bottom bags. So a very busy space for us in terms of application of commercial applications. Here you need very often a moisture barrier. So moisture barrier is I would say medium for Sylvicta. So it is being enhanced by the converters we work with, who will apply biocoating, typically from companies like Sun Chemicals, like Solinis, like Plenty Bostik, so plenty of others who have developed some bio coatings, which means that the packaging is still paper is still recyclable, but then enhancing by much the moisture barrier to reach level of 10 for those of you who are familiar with that. Okay, if I move along to containers and trays, if you take cans, for example, so when you've got an inner liner made of an aluminum foil, this is being replaced by Sylvicta for the barrier properties. Again, you lose the translucency, but you really keep what is important here, which is the barrier properties. Same here, Sylvicta is in the inside. This is a commercial application. It's in the inside of this box, laminated to a board being there for the strength, for the to form really the package, and Sylvicta being there for the barrier properties. And also working on thermoforming our paper at higher grammages to replace typically trays in processed meats industries. The last one is a very straightforward to me. It should be really straightforward, and I can't believe that we still see so many plastic labels when it can be easily replaced by paper labels. Really, we've got now legislation coming in force in Europe, which will help us driving this change and forcing the change with vegetables and fruits, where you need a compostable material now, so that at least it's live in France since the beginning of the year, and then it can be also for cosmetics, for any type of food, when you need a bit of translucency to get your brand to be seen, but want a sustainable material. So a very busy space for us. I just briefly mentioned as well cosmetics and pharmaceutical, where we are playing a role as well, and should play an even bigger role, and we should be able to help with helping brand owners to do this switch. My last slide, quickly, just to show some commercial applications that we have developed with a converter in the UK, a good partner of ours in the UK called Sarenz. They have developed Earth packaging range, fully available. And we have worked with them. As I said, we've got some inherent properties of Sylvicta, but it needs to be sometimes enhanced or completed, I would say, with maybe a heat sealable coating, or maybe sometimes always also a moisture barrier coating. This is coffee roaster, coffee beans wrapped in Sylvicta. You could wonder, where is Sylvicta? Sylvicta will be in the inside to bring the very high barrier properties that coffee needs, because coffee does not lack oxygen at all. It will oxidize and it will lose all of its aroma super quickly. And here the kraft, the thin kraft that is binded with Civicta is used for really to give the strength of the product. And also the look, quite clearly. Pulsitos is a brand that we've started to work with already a couple of years ago now, and they are providing dry nuts for the market. This is Civicta and all over printed with in Flexo, okay, and keeping the freshness. This is outside of packaging. This is a plastic sachet replacement. Here, the barrier properties, you could wonder, what do you really need? Well, you don't really need, you just need a sort of protection. But here really it's to allow a see-through of the product and give a more luxury look and natural look as well to the final product when the consumer can touch it. So back to the haptics of what paper can provide compared to plastic. And finally, and I like this example because you may be aware that wrapping pet food is very difficult because pet food is super smelly, is extremely oily and greasy. And to find, and currently it's often made with a triple laminate, which is PE in the inside, then aluminum foil, then PET. Well, we replace it by a lamination of Civicta in the inside and a kraft on the outside, and that's it. And then it ends up being fully recyclable. So that's it for me in a nutshell. If you want to learn more, we've got a website. You can also contact me freely. And now I hand it over to you, Tom.
Great, thank you, Christophe. Yeah, if I just add a little bit over the top of that, I mean, over the years of working in the paper business, 15 years, the number of times I've been asked by either machine manufacturers or brand owners about the availability of a translucent paper like this, and it's never been around before. So I was really pleased to hear about this when we first learned about it. So yeah, some really good points. And also just to highlight there when Christophe mentioned about eco-design, can't stress that enough really. Thinking about what you do at the beginning of the process when you're designing your products and your packaging and thinking about the circular aspects of it. So thank you very much, Christophe. Final speaker today, before we hopefully have a little bit of time for some Q&A, is Roger Wright from Biffa, who's going to talk about closed loops, not loopholes.
Thank you, Tom. And can you see and hear me okay?
Yep, that's all good. Excellent.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Roger Wright. I'm from Biffa, who are one of the largest waste businesses in the UK. But my career has actually been my background is actually as a packaging designer and as a packaging technologist working in manufacturing and in retail. So full disclosure, I have worked for companies like Dear Smith. Well, I've worked for Dear Smith and Smurfit and other businesses that are dealing with paper packaging. And now in this new role at Biffa, I'm trying to share my experience and influence as many of our brand and retailer clients as possible to make the right calls on packaging from under one roof. And it's why essentially I think we're interested in packaging. We're interested in packaging that can change behaviours and ultimately reduce the waste that we collect in the first place, which might seem counterintuitive for a waste business, but that's true, and that's what we're trying to do. And then, of course, in my role, I have to turn to the subject of how do we create packaging that's better than what went before for our clients. And so naturally, we think about paper, which, as you can imagine, is already abundant in the waste management industry. And obviously the reason Tom invited me to talk about what we do today. And as a packaging technologist in my past, deeply involved with M&S's recent drive to 100% sustainably sourced wood and paper, I am acutely aware of the challenges in the global supply chain for paper, as Julia alluded to. And we all have a responsibility to get this right if you're choosing paper. So that's kind of the theme of what I want to talk about today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rattle through 6 topics that Tom has very helpfully signposted for me. I talk about the big changes in packaging and the role of certified paper, the emergence of the circular economy, which we've mentioned already, and how collaboration can drive your ambitions. There'll be a nod to some of the paper-based packaging formats that eliminate plastics. I'm going to talk about eco-design and design for recycling, quickly cover how changes in packaging legislation will dictate what we do. And finally, how you can future-proof your packaging potentially in the context of waste management, and assess whether you're ready for these changes or not. Now, the observant ones are on the call may notice I've chosen some song titles here, so I may be testing you at the end for the artist's name, and just to make sure you're all still with us till the very end. So the first point is the change, and this is obviously the role of certified paper packaging in a low carbon circular economy, and that's important. Low carbon circular economy, because whether we like it or not, change is fast. It's happening all around us. And paper-based alternatives are and will increase. And in response to the pressure being put upon brands and retailers for recycle-ready packaging. So from our perspective, we say let's embrace the change, but help our brands and retailers make the right choices for this low-carbon economy. Because on that carbon point, we have to address the pushback we get from what I call the plastic evangelists. Because LCA experts often say that pound for pound, plastic has a lower carbon footprint than most other material, including, but not exclusive to paper. But we all know it's not as simple as that. And the sensible debate is really more nuanced, because LCAs, as we know, do not factor in the extraction of the material very often, or indeed the end of life if it ends up in the environment, which often it can. So we feel that context trumps carbon when you've done your due diligence on every aspect of the materials you choose. And I suppose by context, what we mean is, what is the format of the pack? Where in all likelihood will it be disposed of, and to whom? And so the very next question is, how does certified paper contribute to that low carbon economy? And Julia covered this quite well. So I'll quickly cover these 4 points. So structurally, paper punches well above its weight in protecting and shipping goods. It's obviously made from a renewable source, as we've heard, and most people understand it's intuitively recyclable and therefore recycle it. The interesting one for us, though, it can often drive behaviours in such a way as to actually reduce the use of materials and therefore reduce your carbon. And so we like what Morrisons have done with their paper bag recently. And what they did is obviously introduce a reusable strong paper bag to replace their plastic bags for life. But they made it slightly more expensive than their partners who are stuck with plastic. And actually, from the information I've received, they're actually selling less bags now that they've introduced this bag. So, and that was their intention. They don't want to sell bags, but they've managed to convince a lot more of their customers to reuse bags and bring those other bags back to store. I suppose the final thing, and probably the least interesting thing about paper from my perspective, is it will rot down safely in the environment, of course. But we never want to see paper in the environment as much as any other material. Now, the next piece is obviously around the circular economy, and as you may very well ask, what does that mean for packaging? And my response is always simply that you've got to decouple the growth of your business from finite resources like oil, whilst keeping every material you do use in an uninterrupted technical loop or natural loop of reuse and recycle. And of course, paper fits well in that. It's very proficient, which means if you can have control and influence on your supply chain from forest to fork and all the way back round again, you've effectively have that uninterrupted physical loop. And it may not be a true closed loop, but you've met the basic needs of a circular economy. Then you have to ask, why would this work? And it's three things on the slide there. So it's about joining the dots between all the players in the supply loop. You're only as strong as your weakest link, but with a certification process, you can identify and improve that weak link in the chain. So it might be a paper mill that possibly hasn't got the right documentation, or a packaging converter isn't segregating their material correctly. The rising tide raises all boats effectively with this process. Of course, once you've done that, you then have the opportunity to scale up your business as you grow and effectively do more with less. So, for example, you might be able to consolidate more work into fewer factories, which will be a more efficient way of doing it. And then, of course, the final bit of the jigsaw is, you can make what you do more commercially viable. It's a simple economies of scale. And by the way, and I think as Tom mentioned, it's then easier for you to secure a consistent and regular supply of certified material in the long term if you do that. As Christoph has demonstrated, there are any number of elegant alternatives to make your plastic packaging into paper more sustainably. But we don't believe one material should necessarily be lionized at the expense of another. This is about, for us at least, eliminating unnecessary anything, not just plastic. I suppose in this endeavour, and this is part of my role with clients, is innovation, and it's vitally important that we help our clients, you know, or we talk about it a lot. It's very hard. So for almost every 10 ideas you push out, and only one might work. So I suppose this is a call to action to everyone. You know, think about reusable, returnable, and refillable packaging as well. Give it a chance, especially in e-com and in the web retail space. You know, embrace these ideas, including and especially if they're made of paper, obviously. And finally, something I read recently illustrated, there is a growing trend that's relevant to paper in relation to the deposit return scheme that may actually drive people to switch from plastic, aluminium or glass into liquid cartons. And obviously that's going to be done potentially to exploit a gap in these obligations. But it will be done without necessarily having national collections and widely available in markets for that feedstock. So from our point of view, this sums up, you know, the dangers of the unintended consequence of a switch like that without, you know, considering all the options. And obviously what we say is we're striving for closed loops, not loopholes. Now, this piece is about how can we integrate eco-design into your packaging portfolio. And as we know, the direction of travel for new packaging is eco-design and design for recycling. And that's absolutely the right thing to do. But how can we integrate this into your packaging? There's probably three simple things. So if you're familiar with OPRL, which is the on-pack recycling label system in the UK, use the OPRL prep tool, which they've got to help you design packaging that's recyclable. And they can also certify it as recyclable as well once you've done that work. So I'd encourage anyone to look at that. Second point is obviously work with waste management companies such as ourselves to ensure that your packaging is widely recyclable and widely recycled. You know, packaging needs to be widely collected, sorted, and again have end markets to be viable. And then finally, test again. Put those formats, those materials that you're innovating into a waste management system and check that they actually physically move through the system. So this piece is how to prepare for the legislation that's coming, the tax and the extended producer responsibility. And this is an interesting one in the context of fibre, because just because you're using perhaps paper-based packaging or switch to paper-based doesn't necessarily get you off the hook for the tax that's coming, unfortunately. Because regardless of the materials you use, if you don't in parallel, reduce and introduce reusable concepts, the cost of compliance on a like-for-like basis is still going to grow for you, possibly up to 10 times we've seen in the modelling we've done. So how should you prepare for this? And I suppose there's three takeaways here. Is obviously develop all innovative alternatives, but avoid those unintended consequences I mentioned that might look better in the short term or seem to offer you a get out of jail card, but may impact upon other important metrics in your future plans. Now, no one is closer to these changes and likely changes at the moment than the packaging compliance community, of which there are a number of great businesses out there to talk to. We have our own in-house business called BIFPack that does that compliance work. So use us or use the other businesses to get your data in good shape on the materials you use, model the scenarios that are likely, and then you can potentially mitigate against some of those rising costs. At the very least, it'll help you plan for the worst. And then finally, and in our view, as Iceland have demonstrated in this image, we actually think you should go further and faster than legislation has dictated, because it is far too slow. And as I hope we've demonstrated today, if you do go further and faster, it's good for business, it's good for your stakeholders, and obviously it's good for the planet if you do. And then my final sort of takeaway is about how to ensure your packaging is recycle ready. Now, this slide is to help think about what you should do, but in the context of what's happening in waste management, because there are lots of interesting innovations in the waste management techniques and sorting of materials. So firstly, there is some really clever stuff happening with machine learning to sort waste out in real time. And there's the use of AI technology, which will only get more sophisticated and faster. There are some interesting ink, glue, and label removing technologies, maybe less relevant to paper, but it's significant in our world nonetheless. And incidentally, the image on the screen is an innovation called RecycleEye. So this is where we've tipped some recyclable material onto a moving bed, and the camera actually can detect all the different types of materials in the moving as the material passes under the camera. Now, this is only at QC level, but this technology could potentially become integrated into big MRFs or material recycling facilities and do this very quickly in real time. So this sort of a technology is coming. So the second thing is, and something we do with our clients, is I try and identify the ideas that will work in waste management, of course, which ones are here to stay, which ones are just a passing phase, and which ones are really, really bad. So we call this the good, the fad, and the ugly. So this is looking for, for example, it's sensible switches to paper versus those that might look good in a press release, but are very different in reality. Also, as an industry, we're asking and hoping that paper will be collected separately nationwide as part of the resource and waste strategy, not least because we want to avoid the cross-contamination of films, plastic films with paper in those MRFs. And if they're not collected separately, there will be cross-contamination from one to the other. So we're hoping that will be a positive change, and it will really open up opportunities for innovation in the paper space, we think. And then finally, as my final point, really, before we get to the very last slide, is that, as you're familiar with hearing all the time, collaboration is key, and so much more important than it's ever been before. So understand the context of how your piece of packaging is designed and where and how it's used, both up and down your supply chain from where you sit, because this will have a massive impact on whether your materials are going to go round and round again or not. And that's it. I won't dwell too long on this. Thank you for listening. I've put the band's names on the slide there. If you test yourself, if you've got 6 out of 6, very well done. There were some tricky ones in there. And Tom, I'm gonna stop there and say thanks very much.
Great, thank you, Roger. Yeah, interesting that on your last slide, then you mentioned the phrase "collaboration is key."
Yeah.
About 5 minutes before that, as you were working your way through the other points, I've written with an asterisk, "collaboration is key," in those exact words. So I think that's a really good takeout for everybody, and I hope that's one of the objectives of the webinar, was really to highlight the importance of collaboration within the supply chain. And I think that's an area which can't be tackled by legislation. Legislation only goes too far, and as you've said, it doesn't go far enough, it doesn't happen fast enough. So it's really down to this communication between the stakeholders, I think, to get this right. Some really interesting stuff. And also on the MRF, I remember seeing 10 years ago at UPM Shotton, the first time I saw an MRF, a materials recycling facility. And some of the technology even 10 years ago is quite incredible. So, the technology is developing, but also we can do a lot from a supply side and control what's being put into the system before it has to be dealt with as a waste. So some brilliant stuff there, Roger. Thank you for that.
No problem.
I will just put my screen back up for a second.
Okay.
It's really now just for the last couple of minutes to open it up to the floor for any Q&A, any questions from the audience. I haven't seen anything specific so far. If anybody does have something, please feel free to unmute yourself. Let me just double check. No, nothing specific in there. So just for the last minute or so we've got there, just to open it up to all of our speakers there. Pick one of my 4 questions I had. Probably the most relevant one that hasn't really been touched upon by any of the speakers. It's a bit specific to Roger, this one, so apologies to Julia and Christophe. But looking at UK waste collection infrastructure, Roger, one of the biggest challenges that I've noticed over the last few years is the fact that so many local authorities collect waste in completely different ways.
Yes.
How can we tackle this problem? How can we produce a national level collection scheme to help the circular economy work?
Yeah, well, notwithstanding the pace that we've mentioned, the resource, one big pillar of the resource and waste strategy, and the consultation has just closed on this, the second consultation, is a more consistent way of collecting materials. So this will help and impact upon that, and make people at home feel it's a bit easier to know what to collect. But more importantly than that, it's actually going to be mandatory for businesses now to do that as well.
Okay.
So a lot of the waste in the system is lost because it's a business waste and it isn't mandatory to collect it and recycle it in that way. I mean, we do that as part of our offer, but it's not mandatory. It's not mandatory, so that will massively help in the future.
Okay, great. And we do actually have a question now in the chat function there from Alex Lee. Let me just go back up. It's just moved down. Yeah. This is technology for you, isn't it? Let me just scroll down. Alex Lee, to all the presenters, how fast is the conversion and adoption of the sustainable innovation, and what is the cost and the barrier of it? I'm not sure which sustainable innovation Alex is referring to there specifically. So perhaps Christoph, can you maybe touch on that?
Yes, I think he's just referring to any sustainable innovations, and in innovation there is a time for adoption indeed. I think that with all the legislation that has come in place, it's helping a lot. I think the consumers are now asking for it and ready for it, but let's face the reality. For a converter and brand to switch from plastic to a new material, be it paper or bioplastic or whatever, it's quite a big change. So we can see typically that the sales cycle for us is long. So the adoption is relatively quick in terms of principle, but then between the time that you've got this adoption and the time you see it on the market, it's easily a year and a half from our experience. And the cost, and there's a question about the cost. I think the cost, it's being understood by everyone in the supply chain that cost of a sustainable material, at least at the start, will be higher than traditional plastic. This is really being broadly agreed and understood. As far as we are concerned, we are very, very little challenged on cost, much more on the barriers that you can really provide, and protection and food compliance and everything, much more than costs.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that just to add to that, I think I read an interesting report a few years ago from Sweden that the externalities, as they call it, of plastic are not measured. So the impacts that we don't measure of the material. I mean, it's cheap to produce, yes, and it's cheap to buy, but then who bears the cost of the collection and the waste and the pollution that is there as a result of it? So it's a complex topic, isn't it? But I think it's important that we accept that we may have to pay a little bit more for a solution that causes less environmental impact. I think that's the key to that.
I think Tom, Alex also wanted a response from us, I guess, on that question. And very, very quickly, we agree that sometimes it can, on the face of it, look more expensive to introduce a more sustainable alternative. But what we try and do is get businesses to do two things in parallel. So do something at the backstage or somewhere else that potentially, you rob Peter to pay Paul. So you can do two things, and if one can save you money and one's cost you money, hopefully it's cost neutral in the end. Yeah. So that's what we try. That's what we try and do, at least.
That's a good point.
And I like very much Sibyl. If you look at Sibyl comment, what is the cost of not implementing those solutions, and can any brand owner afford not to join the trend? I think that's an interesting comment as well. Can anyone
very good point.
Afford? Yeah, that's a very good point indeed.
Yes, I think that wraps things up quite nicely, actually. So, Sibyl, thank you for that, because you've done my job there. What is the cost of not doing this versus the cost of doing it? I think that's a great wrap-up comment, really. And we've got to 3 minutes past 12. So, rather than keep everybody hanging on the line, I know everybody's got probably lunch, but other commitments to go to. So, I just want to take the last 30 seconds to thank. First of all, PFC for hosting the event. I hope that everybody's got a lot of value out of it. And most importantly, to thank the three speakers that we've had on today. So Julia, Christoph and Roger, a big thank you to you guys. And I think that it's been a really great discussion. So we will make the presentations and the wrap-up document available via email, with a link to a recording of the webinar as well for people that haven't been able to see it today. So thank you very much to everybody.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks a lot.
See you soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.